Just think of it as the rough draft of the podcast world. This is the Newbie Writers Podcast with your hosts Damien Bolt and Catherine Peramangk.
Hey, this is episode 180, and we've got a different show. Finally, I've got a guest that's actually here in my hometown, so that's going to be cool.
Woohoo!
And also someone that doesn't just specialise in Twitter. Anyway. Anyway, I've got Dean Mays on. Dean, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Damien. And Catherine, how are you?
We are good.
Now, you've been up all night. See, we seem to have this trend. Our last guest last week was up at midnight because she was in Wales, over in the UK.
Yes.
But you've just gone and trumped that when you messaged me like, oh, I just got home from work. Like,
Yeah,
it's 8 o'clock in the morning. What is wrong with you? Anyway.
that's right.
But you work in the intensive care unit at a hospital.
I do, yeah. I work night duty in an intensive care unit in a private hospital here in Adelaide.
Oh.
And so I started at 10 o'clock last night, Adelaide time, and finished just before 7:30 this morning. So I was quickly out the door and straight home so I could get warm, for one thing, because it's freezing down here at the moment.
It's rubbish.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so put the kettle on and had a quick muffin before I sat down to talk with you.
So you must have the strongest stomach in the world.
Yeah, I do. But believe it or not, I actually have a bit of hemophobia, which I'm now hemophobia being a phobia for blood.
Really?
Yeah. And I see a lot of blood, and I kind of have learned to live with it after a long period of time. But
Wow. So
yeah, that's one of my weaknesses.
the first time you got into the ICU and, you know, someone gets rushed in, blah, and there's blood everywhere, and you're just like, oh, there's the floor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I saw the floor a few times when I first began.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a great running joke among my colleagues. And yeah, I actually went through a little bit of therapy for that whole issue. So
Well, it's hard to do your job if you keep passing out, and I'm just guessing because I'm not a professional.
Well,
yeah, it's pretty embarrassing. So
oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
but I have learned to live with it.
I had to organise pest control once, and she said, "You know what sort of pest?" I said, "I've got like a beehive growing on the side of the house," and I heard her muttering as she's going through this. She's like, "John, no, he's allergic to bees. Then we've got no, he's afraid of spiders." And I'm going, "Hang on, you're a pest control, and you've got people that are allergic to them and afraid of them." I don't know.
It doesn't sound like an ideal job melding at all.
No, but I don't know. So what? Okay, what made you get into doing that sort of thing? Like, you know, if you've got a fear of something, yeah, they do say to confront it, but to sort of say, this is my career.
It doesn't have a career in it. They just say confront it.
Well, I was an idealistic young high school kid when I finished, year 12 back in the 90s, and I was all gung-ho that I was going to go into nursing and, you know, save the world and all that. And it wasn't until probably my second year when I started to get on the floor and actually do proper clinical placement that I discovered this aversion to blood. Yeah, so and I'm one of these people that I don't give up easily, and that was 20 years ago. So I stuck with it for 20 years, and in that time I've done pretty much everything that there is to do in nursing. But ICU is the one clinical area that I've done more than any other, and I've stuck to it. So, and most of that time that I've done in ICU has been spent with babies and newborns. I did NICU for many years.
Wow.
And so, you know, you had newborn babies coming through covered in blood, which was fun.
God. Oh, my goodness.
Don't drop the baby.
Yep.
But that must be pretty traumatic. I don't know, you'd have to have a fairly hard resolve, especially seeing a baby in that sort of situation. needing intensive care.
I'm dead inside, Damien.
I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. You go through a period of being affected by it, and then you kind of become numb to it. So, and yeah, so the things that used to bother me a lot don't bother me nearly as much as now as what they did then. So, so you get used to it. I don't think you fully come to peace with it. There's still things now that kind of sit me on my bum a bit, but not like it used to. So
yeah. Well, did you end up doing? I did some work putting some cameras and AV into one of the training hospitals in the city, where they've got all those mannequins that move and like they breathe, and you can put catheters in weird spots and stuff like that. Did you get to play with them when you were going through your training?
Back in that was sort of the early 90s when I went through, so they weren't quite as advanced as what they are now, but I have seen those mannequins, and they are freaky.
They are.
Yeah.
Especially when we were the ones getting there at 7 in the morning. No one else who had the key, and you'd walk up to one of the wards. I say that they're just set up like wards, and you'd hear, and you'd look and you'd see them. Someone had left one on, and it was sort of breathing.
Yeah.
Didn't you freak out one of your partners using one of those? We were podcasting when you had that job.
Yes.
You did something with those mannequins.
Yes.
Freaked him out.
We sat one up in a chair in our little office area, and put a hard hat and high vis vest on, and the nurses, the lecturers thought it was pretty funny. They'd walk past and what, and I'd just say, "Don't mind Kevin," and so yeah, we had.
He's very sincere. We're confident that we know what he's thinking.
And things can be attached and detached. So it was Kevin was transgender, put it that way.
Easy pull on and pull off parts, huh?
Don't use those terms, Catherine. That's wrong. Anyway, so
we are talking about writing eventually.
We'll get there. We've got an hour. Well, that's where I was going with this. Anyway,
you were going to segue into this somehow. Okay.
God, the master of segues. We're going to pull this right off now. If you're working in like a high stress environment like that, surely that must give you some sort of inspiration for when it comes to your books, or do you try and keep that separate?
Yeah, I do try and keep it separate, but it's inevitable that I see stuff that just makes for great storytelling.
Okay.
And my love for writing goes back long way before my nursing. But I was never. I've often said that I was never mature enough to write something until my late 30s. So, for whatever reason, whether I wasn't in the right headspace, I'd try to start a project and it'd just fall apart because I just wasn't disciplined enough. But yeah, getting into my 30s, and I don't know, your thinking changes, and I found myself really starting to observe the world much more acutely than I probably had before. And my world was, basically, what I saw in the field of medicine and nursing, and conversations that I had with people, patients and the like, and it inevitably led to me towards concocting ideas and penning things down on bits of paper that I could possibly use, and eventually that kind of led me towards kicking off an actual real project, which I did in around about 2008. Yeah.
Well, how do you try and factor that in? I mean, obviously, if you're currently doing night shift, and nursing hours are all over the place, from what I gather, and having chatted to various people, that you don't do an 8-hour day like some people.
No.
And you could be set to do an 8-hour day that turns into a 12-hour day.
That's right.
How do you then find that time to say, I penned an idea or I've scribbled this down, I'm going to write that? How do you squeeze that in?
Well, in the beginning, it was a case of having a notebook in my work satchel, and I would have it beside me at work, and I'd be penning stuff down, as it came to me. But I've often said you'd be surprised at what you could come up with lying on a gurney at 3 a.m. And I'm one of these people whose mind is rarely off. And I'm also, being a nurse, you learn an acute sense of time management. And so somehow I made it work in the beginning. I'm in a position now where I work a job where I have regular shifts. They are the same shifts every week. So I know from one week to the next what I'm actually doing. So say, for example, I don't work Mondays or Tuesdays. So Mondays and Tuesdays are completely mine. And those are the days that I devote purely to the craft and the business of the craft. So, so as time's gone on, and we've evolved with smartphones and tablets, and my suite of tools has kind of expanded to include those things, and it's made it a lot easier for me to jot ideas down, and so I've become very good at managing my time and using that time quite well.
Well, my brain's now just picturing you sort of standing there bedside. Like, you need to vomit. Can you just hold that in for a minute? You just pull out a little pen and like, he's sword. Oh, you might have a sword. Okay, now you can bath. I've got my notes.
Yep.
Tell us now. Your book went from you actually, just like our guest Nina Amir has said, you blogged your book. So walk us a little bit through this first book of yours and your process, because you went at it in a different, not radically different way, but a different way, and I was interested in your process.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, at about 2008, this idea for a story took shape, and it was one that had been kicking around in my mind for a little while. And I was sort of looking at the state of the publishing industry domestically at that time, and I'd kind of decided that I would have no chance in hell of getting published. But I had this real desire, this drive to want to publish this story. So I started a blog, and I just started putting chapters of this story up on this blog week by week, not really expecting it to do anything, but this story had stuck in my craw for so long that I had to get it out. Otherwise, it was going to do my head in.
There you go. Good reason, you're right, by the way. That totally works.
Yeah. So I'd punch out these chapters. I'd put them up on the blog. They weren't edited. They weren't sort of... they didn't have any bells or whistles, attached to them at all. It was just totally on the fly instinctual writing, and all of a sudden it took off, and all of a sudden we're looking at my page hit numbers, and very quickly they were going from a few dozen to a couple of hundred to a few thousand a month.
Wow.
And I had no idea at the time what that actually meant. All I knew is that I was getting people reading, I was getting people commenting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and people seem to be really loving it. So, and it got to the point where, God help me if I didn't put a chapter up on a particular week. I'd have, my inbox would be flooded with emails saying, "Oh, what's going on? Where are you? What's happened? Where's our story?"
The problem.
Yeah, so it became a real beast of a thing.
Real beast.
Yeah, and so as I became more tech savvy and kind of understood how to use Facebook and Twitter, because this all sort of happened at the very time that those two, social networking was taking off, and I had no idea how to use them properly, but I I just started sort of sharing them to those, and that sort of helped grow the audience for this story that I was telling. And one day it happened that a woman kind of tweeted me out of the blue from Vancouver in Canada. And she said to me that, I really like what you're doing. Have you thought about taking this seriously? And I kind of looked at her credentials, and at the time she was going under the name of I Read, I Write. I knew nothing about her. I didn't know. All I knew was that she was in Canada. But it was enough to make me sort of the hairs on the back of my neck prick up and say, "Ooh, hang on, what's this?" So I responded to her and I said to her, "Not really, but who are you?" And
what do you want?
I don't really want to be real, but who are you anyway? We'll go with that.
Yeah. So anyway, she direct messaged me her email address, and she said, "Look, drop me a line and we'll talk." And so this woman's name was Michelle Halkett, and so she basically presented herself as being a small press publisher up in Canada. She said to me that she had been following this little blog of mine for, I think at that stage it was about 3 months, and she was really hooked on the story, and she really liked what I was doing with it. And so we had a back and forth over, a couple of weeks after that via email, after which time I decided that, yes, this woman was serious. And I actually stopped publishing it to the blog, and that created, can I swear on the radio?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that created a shitstorm.
There you go. Because that would have been what I would have thought. Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah, because I had these well, in italics, fans who
rabid fans would be another word.
Yeah, who were kind of obsessed with this story, and I basically said, look, just bear with me because I think something's going to happen here. Let me just go on hiatus for a little while, and I may have something to tell you down the track. And so for the rest of that year, so we're into 2009 by that stage. So for the rest of that year, I wrote like a demon to try and finish this story and get it to, a serviceable manuscript. I mean, it was by no means perfect. I had no idea about grammar at the time. All I knew was that this story was just basically writing itself. And so I got to the end of 2009, and I sent this this rough manuscript up to Michelle in Vancouver, and I waited about a week, I think, I sent it off, and I didn't have any expectations on what would happen with it. But I got an email from her about a week later and said, "Look, I want to take this to publishing."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a dream. You realize that that's a dream. The two comments you made, I met somebody who loved my stuff and then said, "I want to take it." And the other one is, it just wrote itself. Those are the two things that people would die for. So just no, you just did two trigger phrases.
Yeah, sure. And so, so this kind of mid-30s guy that had been a kind of a wannabe author for most of his life, who never thought he would get published, all of a sudden found himself on the verge of an actual publishing contract.
So cool.
Yeah. And so that has kind of attracted equal amounts of, praise and envy and downright jealousy. Yeah. And a little bit of hatred in there as well, I think. So we spent probably the last quarter of 2009 and into 2010 editing this book, or this manuscript. And in January of 2010, my first book, The Hambledown Dream, was published worldwide by what was then I Read, I Write Publishing out of Vancouver.
Very cool.
Yeah. So what was the inspiration behind the book, though? I'm just reading the little synopsis here. I won't give too much away, but
Yeah, so look, the core of the story is it deals with reincarnation, and so you've got two young men, one who is basically good and kind, and has got the world at his feet in his early 20s. He's very much in love with a young woman. He's about to start a career as an architect. He loves classical guitar, and yeah, everything's going really great for him. And then he goes and contracts cancer. And of course, the cancer basically takes his life. Now, at the same time you've got that, you've got another young man over the other side of the world who has no connection with this guy whatsoever, who is the polar opposite. He is sort of early 20s. He's a complete no-hoper. He's addicted to drugs. He is mixing with some really bad people in urban Chicago. But the one thing that he does have that does connect kind of nebulously is that he has also got a love for classical guitar. And so at this critical point earlier in the book, you have an event that happens where one life fades. Well, actually, two life fade. They fade at the same time, but one lives and the other one dies. And then what happens next is basically the body of the story, and you get this journey of a young man trying to sort of, redeem himself, but at the same time he's plagued with the memories of another person's life, one that he's never lived, and it becomes an obsession to find out whose life this was, but also the images of this young woman that features in these memories becomes a bit of an obsession for him, and he has to find out who this young woman is. He feels something for her, but he's never met her. And so you can probably extrapolate from that where the story goes. So it's essentially a love story, and it's just a kind of a what dreams may come styled journey of reincarnation, I guess you could say.
So do you also like classical guitar? I mean,
I do, yeah, I do. I see. The core idea was what I started with was two guys that love classical guitar. One was a really nice guy. The other guy was a complete arsehole. How could I actually, make a story out of that? And so I actually looked at the two sides of myself at that time, and I sort of looked at everything that, I kind of thought was good within me and everything that I thought was bad within me, and I created these two characters out of that. And then I sort of thought, well, what can I use to tie these two together? And I love music, so music seemed to be really easy for me to kind of bring in, and then I went from the classical guitar aspect of it there. I knew a couple of people in Chicago, and I had a real kind of I had a real thing for the city. It really kind of attracted me, so I wanted to use that as a setting. But then I also wanted to use a setting on the south coast of New South Wales here in Australia, where I'd spent a lot of time as a kid. And so I kind of fictionalized elements of that, and turned this little town that I used to spend time at into the fictional town of Hambledown. And so Hambledown is the Hambledown in the Hambledown Dream.
Ah.
Yeah,
so how'd you come up with the name Hambledown? That's kind of interesting.
You know what? I just tossed it around. I came up with a few different names, and that one I kept coming back to. And kind of the more I wrote it and said it out loud, the more I liked it. And it stuck. And yeah, that's the way it's been ever since.
Yeah, I don't think it would have the same ringtone if it was like the King's Cross Dream.
Yeah, no, no, not at all. Yeah.
And then you also wrote a book, but that's Awesome. You also wrote a book about the Aboriginal experience. I thought that was interesting. Was that the second book after the Hambledown Dream?
Yeah, so that's a book called Gifts of the Peramangk, and so
Yeah.
towards the end, when I was basically finishing up with the Hambledown Dream, and we were into the editing and polishing, I'd started coming up with ideas for a follow-up book, and I didn't want it to be basically a I just didn't want it to be a kind of a sequel or just a rehash of what I'd done before, but I wanted to try something that I basically felt was pretty risky, because I myself am not Aboriginal, but through my nursing, which is where we get back to the inspiration from my career, I'd met a lot of Aboriginal people, and I'd worked with a lot of Aboriginal people in the community here in Adelaide.
Uh-huh.
And I was really taken by the stories that they told me. I was really drawn to their experience over a long period of time. And before long, I'd sort of come up with this kind of rough outline of a story that I could tell in 1950s Australia, which was a pretty dark time for Aboriginal people. We had the White Australia policy in full swing back then. But then I wanted to also tell a story that was set in the modern day, and it looked at basically the effects of the White Australia policy on what was happening to Aboriginal people now. So with the 1950 story, I told the story of a young girl named Virginia, who is basically taken from her family and essentially sold into slavery, which was pretty much what it was back then.
Yeah.
And this time, I was drawn to the idea of having her as a young violin prodigy, and she was taken under the wing of a kindly station owner, wife, who saw talent in her and decided to nurture it. But because of the politics of the time and the crushing oppression of the Aboriginal people, that young girl was never able to fulfil her true potential. And so you've got the story cutting to pretty much now, or at that time 2012, where that young girl has become this old woman who's slowly descending into dementia and losing her faculties, and she's raising her granddaughter. And her granddaughter is showing signs of being a prodigy as well. And so she takes it upon herself to impart her experience of the violin onto her granddaughter Ruby. But she realizes that if Ruby's to be successful, she needs to find a teacher that can take her forward, because Virginia's getting old and she's becoming forgetful and all those sorts of things. So it's a real coming of age story. It's a triumph over adversity story, and it's a story that I became really passionate about during the writing of it.
Did you have to research that sort of stuff? I mean, how do you get into the... You can't just write a book from the Aboriginal point of view as a white man and then go, here you go. I mean, do you then have to start, I don't know, finding people with that Aboriginal heritage and say, tell me about the stolen generation? Cup of tea?
Basically, that's what I did. Like, that book took me essentially 2.5 years to write, and a year of that was devoted purely to research. So that was actually talking to people, researching the history of the stolen generation, the White Australia policy as it pertained to them. I was met with a great deal of skepticism by a lot of people, but I was also I also had a lot of a few key people in my corner, some of whom were Aboriginal people who, they really thought that I could pull this off. There wasn't a lot of people that thought I could do it.
Yep. But that's good, though, in a sense. Doesn't that drive you to go, I'll show you now?
Yeah, that's it. And that gets back to the whole thing about my, blood phobia. I'm not a person that gives up. You know, if people tell me I can't do something, I just grind my teeth and say, well, you know, I'm going to show you.
It's the Australian
So yeah,
way.
so after about 12 months of pure research and covering my office walls with all sorts of bits and pieces of paper and, you know, recordings that I'd made of people I'd spoken to, and I started to kind of really flesh out this story. And that was probably the hardest story to write, because for the whole time I was plagued by self-doubt. I never thought that I'd be able to finish it. I went through a few personal issues towards the middle of the writing of that story, which nearly, you know, derailed it completely. Um, and but then, you know, with perseverance and time and, you know, that little cadre of people that were in my corner, I eventually got that manuscript done. And so I went back to Michelle in Vancouver, and basically it was a sure thing. You know, she basically said, we're going to go with this straight away. So
Awesome.
yeah.
I mean,
So we spent a lot more time on the editing and just the fact checking and you know, getting it perfect, basically. And then we put that out there in 2012 in October.
Okay. And what was the? Go ahead, David.
I was just on the Aboriginal side of things. Has it sort of spurred you on to write something else? I mean, they have so many, you know, small stories as part of that, you know, the 1950s right through, where it was pretty bad. That you know, this you've sort of encapsulated one thing of, yeah, someone who was a violinist, etc., etc. Have you heard other stories that you thought, man, I could write about that? I could write a whole book on this person's story.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
That's right. You could, but Gifts of the Peramangk nearly killed me. And after I'd done it, you know, I didn't have any petrol left in the tank, to sort of be metaphorical for a bit. And when I tried, or, you know, when I set out to promote that, you know, here in Australia at least, no one wanted to touch it. They just felt that it was, you know, too sensitive. You know, it was that old chestnut of the black armband view of history again, and, you know.
It wasn't 2000. Wasn't 2012 when someone was supposed to, or he apologised? Was that year?
Yeah, Rudd apologised in 2008.
Yeah.
And so that was, you know, depending on what sort of side of the political fence you're on, it was either, you know, an absolute triumph, or it was, you know, the darkest day in our nation's history. But and look, we're 7 years, nearly 8 years on from that apology.
Yeah.
And look, I'll be honest, I don't think things have changed for the better at all.
No,
you know, in fact, they've gotten worse for Aboriginal Australia. We've still got, you know, an appalling record of health outcomes for children. We've got an appalling, you know, record in education. You know, we've got, you know, our prison population is overrepresented by Aboriginal men. You know, and look, I've worked amongst some of these people, and, you know, they're good people. You know, they are really good people, and they are grossly misunderstood.
I think, and I agree. I did a job at a couple of schools here. We've got some Aboriginal schools, which I think is a little bit silly in some senses. It still segregates them. It's like,
Sure.
Right.
That's
the
what
guys are being special or whatever.
Yeah, and we were doing some work and walked past. I was carrying some tools, and there were a couple of the students, and one guy, he accidentally stepped in my way. I just moved around him. He says, "Oh, sorry, mate. I'm what did you say? I'm a black fella in your way." And I stopped and I went, "Oh, what?" I was shocked. I thought, how sad.
Yeah.
It's just ingrained in them. Then they're like, "Oh, we're in the way."
Yeah.
It just shocked me. I just spent the rest of the afternoon going, "What a strange thing to say."
Yeah, sure.
You know.
Sure.
So
it is, and it's really unfortunate, isn't it?
Yeah. I didn't. It was odd. I didn't have any. There's no dramas. He's just a student. I didn't say anything. It was bizarre, and I can see now why that your book then would be hard to. Some people perceive it in a strange light as well. From both sides as well, because again, it comes down to, well, how come you're telling a story from an Aboriginal point of view and you're not Aboriginal?
Yeah, that's right. And see, that question had been put to me a number of times by different people, and you know, what gives you the right to write a black man's story? Because
And what
I
do you
can.
say to that? Because we have that we have that conversation in the States as well. Louise Eldridge, who writes extensively on our Native American population, and she is not. She might be partially Native American, but she's coming at it from a privileged white woman's perspective, you might say.
Sure.
And that is a conversation that gets thrown around a great deal. Do you? And so you can answer this question: do you need to be embedded, or do you need to be a native to write about the native experience, or can you come at the native experience with a different vocabulary and a different view in order to speak the words that maybe they can't find? Where did you come? What side did you fall on that?
Well, I never assumed that I was an insider, and so I was always an observer of their culture, but writers observe. I mean, that's what we do. We observe society. We observe culture. We and how we choose to interpret that, depends on how we're committed to interpreting it faithfully. And I mean, I go back to the point that I spent 12 months, purely just researching and getting a feel for the people and for the story that I wanted to tell. And at the end of the day, this was my story about people that I had created for the purposes of that story. So, so in crafting those characters, though, I had guidance, and I sent sections. I discussed sections of the book with people that were Aboriginal people, Peramangk people that know the culture, and they said to me, they looked at different points in the book and they said, right, well, you've got that right, that's really good. I would do this here. What you said over there is probably wrong. I think you need to do it like this. And I listened to that. I took that on board. And wherever there was a change that was suggested, I made that change, because I didn't want to be kind of accused of appropriating their culture and turning it into
an accusation that gets thrown around. Yeah.
And so by the time I got to that final manuscript and took it back to the people that I had been working with, I got that kind of final nod of the head, and it was just kind of like approving nod, and I knew I'd gotten it, so
that's pretty impressive too. No wonder you were exhausted. I mean, the back and forth on that sounds exhausting. I mean, it's so you're throwing your stuff out there and then having it come back, and then putting it out there again and having it come back to you. That is very hard for a writer. So good for you for pursuing that and sticking.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to be so respectful and faithful to these people, and to this the Peramangk people, which are not in great numbers anymore in South Australia. I actually thought they were extinct to begin with, until I started looking around and actually discovering that there were Peramangk people around. And so, funnily enough, one of the people that I work with the most actually is a Peramangk descendant who lives in Japan. And so I would have email conversations back and forth with him, and he actually kind of he had put together his own dictionary of Peramangk words and Peramangk phrases, and
Wonderful.
he actually shared that with me, and we discussed that and how I could incorporate that into the story. So it was a story of real meaning. So yeah.
That's insane. How's it been?
Yeah, it is insane.
How's it been perceived? I mean, obviously from overseas, UK and American, all those sorts of markets, they're not as...
That's us overseas.
Yeah, and so is Tasmania, but I'm not going to split hairs. But
Look, in America, it was received really well. So well that it was actually nominated for an electronic publishing industry award last year.
Very cool. Good for you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so that was something that kind of knocked me off my feet a bit. Here in Canada, it was received very well because the Canadian people have got a very similar thing with the Inuit people. So there was a lot of resonance between our two, the Aboriginal people here and the Inuit people up in Canada. So I received a lot of good feedback from those people, and Canadians more generally. Look, I had a built-in kind of fan base, if you will, from the first book. So they all came back to this one and were really surprised by the story because it was so different to Hambledown. It was such a meatier and kind of deeper story than what Hambledown was. So that was really great. In terms of the mainstream media attention here in Australia at that time, look, I struggled.
Okay.
And I think because it was probably controversial at first glance.
I would assume so.
Just a little.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. So it didn't really pick up the way I kind of hoped it would. But look, it's still ticking along. It's still selling copies, across the world, both in print and digital format. So that's really encouraging to see. And so, yeah.
So how, just sort of on that with the exposure and that sort of things, I've just noticed on your site, you look after Hambledown Road imprints.
Yeah. It sounds more impressive than what it is.
You're a terrible salesman.
Yeah. Okay, so basically what Hambledown Road Imprints is a kind of a company that I set up for the purposes of distributing my work here in Australia. And so I would basically act on behalf of Michelle and Central Avenue Publishing is what they're known now. And so I would basically purchase stock from her and I would act as a sales agent here in Australia. And I would pound the pavement, here in Adelaide, over in Melbourne, in Sydney, and basically do the work of, a distributor.
Well, that's why that was another facet of why I wanted to have you on. Is I get the vibe a little bit that Australia, as big as we are, is a little bit isolated. We seem to be very influenced by Amazon, Barnes and Noble, very Americanized companies.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Because you're the center of the universe. It's hard to compete.
It is hard to compete. I agree.
And so it seems very easy for especially people in the US when we have guests on who are like, it was up on Amazon. Oh, we got a publishing deal, and they get those distribution rights. Yep. How have you found it being here? Sure, you can buy the stock. It's good to have that connection through a Canadian publisher. But then once you've got that, how are you finding it then trying to spread that through Australia?
Yeah, well, so a lot of it's word of mouth. And, using my author platform, Facebook, Twitter, and a few other Goodreads. I use Goodreads a bit as well to do that, the online thing, but then it's a lot of it's a lot of phone calls and getting out there and seeing people and talking to them, and so I basically created my own sales leads. So basically a list of bookshops and outlets here in Australia that I could basically try and get on a first name basis with, and then sell to them and do that. So
how was that moving into from your normal career? Yeah, think about this. From your normal career as a nurse and you're used to that environment to then say to your wife, you know what, I'm going to go to Angus and Robertson in town and I'm going to try and sell them some books.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, that's what you do. So you arm yourself with your little leather satchel over your shoulder, and you've got your press kit in there, and you've got your copies, samples of your books, any sort of promotional materials that might go with it, and basically you talk to them. You find out the right person to talk to, and you talk to them. You develop a relationship with them, and look, some of those relationships have been really good. Some of those relationships have been bloody awful.
Yeah.
And that's how you sort of work from there. So, I should also say that having Hambledown Road imprints has been really good in terms of knowing how to arrange my tax situation.
Yes.
So I get quarterly statements from my publisher based on the sales of the books that I've got out there worldwide, and then I've got separate statements that I go to her and I put in a purchase order and she sends the stock out, and the great thing about that is that because we've got our product sitting on a server at Lightning Source. Lightning Source have got distribution centres all over the world, and the closest one to me here in Adelaide is actually Melbourne. So she puts in an order on my behalf, and that order basically comes to me from Melbourne.
Well, that's all right. So you get it in a couple of days then.
Which is pretty much. So which is really handy. So
and what's also cool is you can claim your trips to Melbourne, Sydney, and also all
right.
the driving around on tax.
Yep. So so I've registered an ABN number, and so all these expenses that I have running the computer here at home, talking to you guys on Skype, which is not really costing me anything, but that's fine.
We don't get paid either, so it's not. I can't claim anything either.
So there's this little business side of it that I've become really astute with in terms of what can I claim, what can't I claim, and
Well,
and look, where the profits kind of drop off a little bit, when I'm in between books, the costs of the running of this little enterprise enables me to recoup that through my tax. So that's how Hambledown Road Imprints works.
Can people then contact you? Like if there's any Australian authors that are thinking, I don't know what I can do, can they contact you and you put them in touch with, if you think their work is good enough, put them in touch with Central Avenue over there?
I have done that. I have done that in the past. Central Avenue's books have been closed to new authors for a while now, purely because they've got a stable of authors that they're working with, and that's more than enough work for them at the moment. But I do know, I just actually spoke to Michelle just this morning, actually, before I came on air with you guys, and they're actually opening up again for new submissions. So, I have referred people on. I have developed a couple of relationships with a couple of small press publishers here, and if people have come through me, I've had a look at what they've got. If I think that this publisher over here might like what they've got, then I refer them on to them. and if another publisher over there has, they're looking for something in particular, and an author has come to me and said, what do you reckon? I'll refer them on to them as well. I don't take on any titles for distribution myself because I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
Like I'm flat out doing what I can with my titles at the moment. And given that I'm gearing up for a new release later this year, I'm pretty much sort of focusing solely and wholly on that. So
yeah, we don't hear. I don't know. I don't really hear or come across too many Australian, small publishers that are sort of doing really well. They always seem to be tied to the bigger international ones, and that's my question. So where does an Australian author turn? Because there is that focus of going, just get on to Amazon. I don't know if you must.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, self-publishing, in this day and age is still probably the best option for, an author that really, really, really wants to get a product out there. But if they're going to do that, then they have to be, dedicated to getting the best possible product ready for publication that they can. So, obviously the best editing that they can afford, and then they've got to be able to market it, and they've got to actually think like a salesperson. And look, I've been doing this for, 6 years now, and I still don't know it all, I'm still learning how to market myself. So I've learned a lot in that time, but I don't pretend that I know it all, and I would never say that I do know it all, because but that's such a huge part of what we do as writers is that marketing thing, and you've got to be willing to get yourself out there and sell yourself.
I agree. I mean, I've had to learn how to sell in my business, and that's always hard. And I find myself if I flail a little bit, I tend to go back to but don't go by what I'm saying. I'm just a technician.
Yeah.
And that usually
that.
Yes, but that usually closes the deal, because they're like, "Oh, you're not just a salesman." It's like, no, I'm the guy putting this stuff in. So
that's why I'm telling you the brutal, honest truth, right?
Yeah, and that's also just to cover the fact that I actually have no filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than going into a meeting and saying, "Hi, who the hell put that in the room next door?"
Yeah.
And invariably the answer is the head guy who's sitting at the table with you.
Yes, that has happened.
What? Yeah, that's why you don't walk into a new company and say, "Oh my God, your website sucks," and the CEO looks at you and says, "My wife designed that."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
damn. Okay.
I had that once before, actually in a school. I just walked in and went. We walked into a room. It was showing me some stuff, and I had to quote on some things, and I saw like a Nintendo Wii controller strapped to a projector looking down, and I went, "Holy crap, I've never seen that before. Who the hell did that?"
Yeah.
And he just went, "Well, I did." And I went,
Uh-oh. It's lovely. It was a lovely attempt. Sorry.
No, I just looked at him and went, "Well, glad you called me then."
Oh, you're bad.
Yeah.
Don't.
Classic.
Is that part of this? That's part of your charm.
Oh, that is the part of my charm. And yes, we scored that school, so I can't complain. But anyway, I don't know. I've worked with too many salesmen. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
That sell sand to the Arabs, as they say.
Yep. But you need them. You need them in your businesses.
Yes. Now, Dean, where can we find, your books, all that sort of stuff out there on the internet?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess the best possible place you can go to is my official website, which is aptly titled www.deanfromaustralia.com.
Dean from Australia, that's cute.
Now, Dean from Australia started out as a bit of a joke. I used to knock around with a few comedy podcasters in America a few years ago, and I was basically given the kind of very mundane title of Dean from Australia, and for some reason it took off. So whenever I did any on-air stuff, it was always Dean from Australia. And even now, like I still have a bit to do with some different people, both stateside and in the UK, and it's Dean from Australia. So when I set up my website, I wasn't going to go with, author Dean Mays or deanmays.com. It was Dean from Australia. And
well, if you answer to that, it's a good way to go.
Yep, and it works. And all you have to do is Google Dean from Australia, and there I am.
Well, there you are. Excellent.
Yep. And so you can basically go there, and all the links to my Twitter feed, my Facebook page, my Instagram account, which I have a lot of fun with. It's all there, basically. You can read samples of my work. You can listen to audio interviews that I've done in the past. And you can even sign up for my newsletter. And if you do, you get a couple of free short novellas, which I've written.
Awesome.
So that's all there. So that's probably the easiest way to go. You can look me up on Twitter and from there, and connect and all that. And I'm pretty friendly.
I'm friendly.
I've just discovered Archer. Do you guys watch Archer?
No.
I want to though. I'm getting through Suits at the moment.
God, I discovered Archer the other night. It was on iView, ABC iView. Damien, you'd know that. And I'm absolutely hooked. So I've binged watched about 3 series of that already. And so I'm all on about Archer at the moment.
I'm going to have to check it out. It is on my list.
It is blisteringly funny and so wrong on so many levels, but it's just like, I love it.
So, yes, our listeners are probably thinking, 2 Australians, they don't take anything seriously.
Oh, God, no. No. Why would we do that?
I don't know.
Why would you do that? But I love you for that.
Oh, I don't
It's like
know.
the whole point. We think you're fabulous. I do.
Yeah, but it's not like, but you think we're fabulous in like that cute kind of, look at that cat wearing the crocodile hat sort of way.
No, I like the whole black humor.
Yeah,
real
see,
thing.
and see,
I'm not a cat video girl.
This is a great selling point for me as an author too, because you Americans kind of like Australians a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the whole accent thing, and So when I sort of put myself out there as this Australian nurse writer,
Okay.
yeah, people's heads explode and they shoot rainbows out and stuff like that. So.
Well, you can't move, though, because you'd have to change your website.
Yeah, I know. It'd be terrible, wouldn't it? No, I'd probably just do it out of spite. I'd just keep it as Dean from Australia out of spite. So,
Do you know what I would register then? I would register where you'd move to as Dean from Australia, now in Holland or something, .com.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I am.
Dean from the People's Republic of China. But then I'd get banned there.
You would, yes.
Yes,
And
you would.
Dean from the USSR doesn't really have the same ring to it either.
No.
All right. Now, we've got a couple of things we need to do. Please stick around for them. Do our word of the week. We should do that. This word comes from Arlene Miller from bigwords101.com, and it's jazzatry. What? Jazzatry? It's a noun. Whatever. What a nice sounding word. It is poetry read to a jazz accompaniment. Right. Also known as wankery.
I actually came up with... my first thought was William Shatner.
Jazzatry. Yeah,
Oh,
right.
yes. He's done some beautiful, hilarious spoken word performances. Yes.
Spock, put the jazz on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's...
What did he do? I'm trying to think of, and we can.
He did Common People with. No, I was going to say Henry Rollins, but that's not right. But he did an album about 6 years ago with Ben Folds, and it was really, really good.
He also did Ozzy Osbourne songs too, I think.
That's right.
He did something like that, and he took it really seriously, deconstructed it, and then did it as a spoken beat poem. And I think you can find it on YouTube. It was hilarious. I mean, that man knows how to work his brand, and he's very funny.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The other guy that was really good at that was Christopher Lee, the actor Christopher Lee, who
Yes.
died recently. Yeah,
Yes.
he used to do some brilliant stuff.
Yes.
Brilliant jazzistry. Yeah.
You know, he also recorded a heavy metal album too.
That's right. He did.
Amazing. That man is a hero. But I don't know. Here's the question then. If you've written some poetry, how do you then choose the jazz song to go behind it?
Well, I think that's it. I think that's part of the art of it, and maybe that's why we have a noun for it. Jazz, instead of poetry, jazzertree. Is that you have the work, you have the words on the page. How do you make that more musical? How do you do that without being extremely tedious? If anybody's ever listened to, I listened to a whole rendition of the Firebird accompanied by bongos at a wedding reception, and I didn't pass out. I just continued to drink. It was not good. Really a bad outcome, or very cool. So I think that your question is that's the art of it, is choosing something that's not going to put people into a coma is going to be part of what your job is.
Yeah, but see, I'm thinking now, if I go to the Writers' Festival here, it's in March, I think.
Oh, that's right.
And if someone gets up during the poetry section and says, just cue track 1, all you're going to hear from me is, oh, and then I'll just walk away.
Right. Right. That's totally what we do. And so the question then is, how do you overcome that, and how do you create something that is more interesting, that is engaging? There's all those pieces to that.
Oh, well, speaking of which, should we do a tortured sentence?
Yeah, speaking of tortured, yes.
Next time, don't put the wrong emphasis on the right syllable. Tortured sentences.
So I recorded that, actually, from when Dean was at work.
It's people passing out from the blood. No!
No, that was a patient that came in and spelt something wrong.
This is...
That's what I kind of dream of when a patient tries to tell me what my job from looking stuff up on Google.
Oh, don't you love that? I try to stay off WebMD and let the doctors tell me what's going on.
Yeah, have you ever heard that? Hang on, Catherine. Have you ever had a patient sitting there and they're like, well, I was on Yahoo Answers and it says I've got gout,
Can I swear?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All the fucking time.
I'm going to have to rooster that word, but that's fine. Yeah.
WebMD, right? I mean, we're dangerous. We come in with a third of the knowledge that we need total, and think that we've got all the answers. It must drive you guys nuts.
Yeah. Do you remember the show Becca?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Becca because Becca just, if somebody came and did that to him, he'd probably belt them over the head.
Yeah. I don't know. I really like that show, actually, especially with the blind man sitting at the bar. But I don't know. The internet, it must suck. And especially with people waiting in sort of the emergency department. If it's not that serious, and seriously, if you've got the flu, don't go to the emergency department, you idiot.
Yeah.
They
But
must
they
sit
come
there.
in with the flu and they think it's like Spanish flu or something like that. So,
Yeah.
and they've
Oh, it's gotta be
researched.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they just watched, World War Z.
Yes.
And they thought I'm a zombie. I just know it.
Oh.
Yeah.
And have you had any doctors start that they think they're house? And you're like, seriously, you're not house. You're just a doctor.
Yeah.
Anyway, this tortured sentence.
It's challenging.
It is challenging. Catherine, did you want to read this tortured sentence out?
Yeah, this is from the World According to Student Bloopers, and this was compiled by Richard Lederer from the St. Paul School. He does not say where St. Paul School is. I think that was probably strategic on his part. So here is a sentence from the World According to Student Bloopers. Socrates was a famous Greek teacher who went around giving people advice. They killed him. Socrates died from an overdose of wedlock.
How many wives did he have?
12 or 13 might do it. I don't know.
Right. I've nearly died from one so far. Jesus. Anyway.
So I liked that.
All right, well, let's do a quick prompt. I don't know, Dean, do you use prompts to kick that writing juice going? You probably don't need it with all the characters you'd get every night.
Yeah. No.
All right. Well, some people need a prompt to kick them off.
Yeah.
So this one is, take a look at an old family photo. Write about what was going on behind the scenes. How Uncle Frank didn't want to leave the table. How there was a mad scramble to get Timmy cleaned up for the picture. How your sister bossed everyone around under the guise of organising. What do you think is behind all those Christmas card photos? Yes, well, my brother-in-law's a photographer, so most of the time it's just standing there forever waiting for the perfect shot.
Which could be part of the story, standing around forever. I mean, waiting
Yes.
is a great metaphor. It's a great analogy. So that can work. I just like, it's always interesting to look at a family photo and one person will tell me what happened and then another person will tell me something completely different. I was like, you're both in this photo, but it doesn't look like you were in the same room. How did that work?
Well,
It's fascinating.
my mother's...
Do you know-
Sorry?
Oh, God, sorry, David. I was just going to say, do you know the quickest way to lose a friend on Facebook?
Unfriend them.
No, well, yeah, thanks. You comment. A lot of girls that I know will dress themselves up to the nines and put their photo on Facebook, and their hair, their dress, their jewelry.
Right.
But there's always
Right.
something
Get it all-
going on. There's always something going on in the background, and it's like I'll often comment and say, "Oh, I really like that curtain."
Yes.
Oh,
Your dog is
Oh.
humping that cat.
Yes. I do the
you
same.
look great. There's madness behind you.
They hate it.
Yeah. I'd be
What
like,
about you?
who gave you that set of crockery in the background? But yeah. My mother's always trying to find the perfect photo, and she had a big picture framed, and I walked in and went, "Why'd you take a picture of a signpost?" And she goes, but there was the forest behind it. I'm like, yeah, but you've taken a picture of someone's business sign and framed it. And she's like, well,
Oh, dear.
but look at the green. I'm like, whatever, mother. Yes. She does it of the boy too. She'll take a photo of our son, and she says, look, it's such an amazing photo. I'm like, yeah, but he's got a booger hanging out his nose. She goes, yes, I need you to Photoshop that out.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to fix that big guy. So
Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, Dean, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Actually, there is actually. I want to give a shout out to Stephanie Hexon, who was responsible for setting this up.
Yes. Good old Steph.
She's a great girl. I haven't seen her in a while, but I want to give a shout out to her and to say thanks and hope she's doing well.
Yes. Well, actually, I haven't spoken to her for a while either, and that was a chance meeting. Bumped into them. Can't remember where now. At a shopping centre, I think. Or no, it might have been online. And anyway, yeah, we were just talking about it, and I was talking about the podcast and that sort of stuff. And she said, "Oh, you should chat to Dean. He's an author." And yeah, I know him through soccer, and I thought, wow, we've got old.
Yeah, that's right. Their boy was doing goal kick at Cumberland Park with my son Xavier, and yeah, so we had many a nice cold Saturday mornings with badly brewed coffee and watching our kids play soccer. It was great fun.
Yes,
So,
you know you're in that phase of life when it's not like, oh, I met this guy at a bar, blah, blah, blah. It's well, I was at soccer, it was freezing, but you should chat to this guy.
right.
Got that to look forward
That's what
to.
happens.
Anyway, and Catherine, who do you want to give a shout out to? Your doctor?
Well, I want to give a shout out to, I've got 4 other authors and myself, and we are putting together a Facebook party, Girls Kick Ass Facebook party.
Oh.
And it's on August 13th from noon to 4 on Pacific Daylight Savings Time. And come on by to the party, and everybody's giving away their copies of their books. We're having contests, we're chatting about our books, and I'm doing that for the launch of Future Gold.
Cool.
So come on downtown. August 13th for the Facebook party.
Right, and I want to give a shout out to the couple that had a panic attack last night. Wife and I were on our way out to dinner, and I decided to take the ute for a drive. It's been raining, and so the back of the ute was full of water, And
Oh.
because there's nothing in there, it's just and the cover wasn't clicked on properly. Whatever, we thought we'd give it a run, and I was about to get out onto the highway, and this car was right behind me, flashing its lights and tooting. And me, when I'm in the ute, I can be a bit of a dickhead. Let's be honest. And I just was saying to the wife, "Oh, this wanker is pissing me off. I'm going to slow down a bit." And they just kept up. And we got to some lights, and they pulled up next to me, and the lady in the car was freaking out. She's waving, trying to get me to wind my window down. So I whined, I said, "What?" And she goes, "You've got so much petrol pouring out the back of your car, it might explode."
Oh.
And I said, "It's water from the ute, from the back."
Oh, no.
And she goes, "Oh, okay." And she's fanning her face. She put the window back up, and they drove off.
Never mind.
I said to Sharon, it would have been funny if we did turn the corner and the car just went boom. But anyway, yeah. And
Right.
in hindsight, we did pull into the car park of the restaurant. There's this very fine trail of water all the way behind me out into the street. So, thank you to them. It probably ruined their evening. It probably took ages to calm down from that. But anyway. So yes. Now, next week, who have we got on next week?
Next week we've got Lori Behringer, who has written a book on the California Gold Rush, as have I. So I thought, we're going to talk about the Gold Rush,
Cool.
the one in California.
Right. Actually, yeah, my boy just watched a movie called Jock and the Hero Dog about some gold rush. It was terrible. The worst film I've ever seen.
But usually dogs are in the Klondike, and it's the Alaskan Gold Rush.
You know what they say? Never work with animals or children.
That is exactly what they say. Or both together, children leading animals. Don't follow that as well.
No. All right. Well, Dean, thank you for being on. Good
Hey,
show.
look, thank you. This has been really great. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well,
Good. Our pleasure.
until next week, we'll see you then.
See you then.
Your book starts here on the Newbie Writers Podcast.